Hello and welcome to a special video on the In the Money Media YouTube channel. This is not Horseplayer Happy Hour, though the last time there was a Horseplayer Happy Hour, we were drinking, and I was here at Keeneland. This is a special Kentucky Derby pace analysis. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornital, out here by the North Gate, and joined in person for once by, I want to say, TVG's Matt Bernier, but we don't use that branding anymore.
Not anymore. Yeah, we're pretty quick to phasing that entirely out.
Exactly. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say from FanDuel TV, he is TV's Matt Bernier. So I get to use my line anyway.
What's
Cheers,
up,
my
buddy?
friend.
Good to see you.
Yeah, this is good fun.
Yeah, like you say, the last time we did something like this, you were here. I was not here.
Yeah, I was like over there. Yeah, you were. We need a clever name for your home setup.
Well,
the undisclosed location in New England. That's as good as I come up with.
That's as good as it gets. Pretty soon they're going to make me put that on there because I'm going to do some stuff from home over the summer for FanDuel. So the sort of cat will be out of the bag. But, yeah, we're here at Keeneland, and it's a good day. I know you won't be necessarily listening to this in sync, but it's Maker's Mark Day, and Modern Games is here.
Yeah, it's exciting. Thus the Breeders' Cup purple. That's why I'm representing. And no, we did not hire extras to come and walk behind us. It is College Day here as well, so the vibes are very, very positive. People are having a lot of fun.
This is as busy as it is during the Breeders' Cup.
Yeah, I would agree. It's nutty. The bar lines are crazy. Thank you for using your magic to sort this out.
27 minutes in line to get 2 beers. They're the best beers I've ever had.
Yeah, you have your priorities in order, clearly, though. Let's talk about this Kentucky Derby pace scenario. We've got a pretty good idea of what this field is going to look like. Obviously, some moves could happen between now and then. But I want to start off just by asking you the most basic question. Who do you think is going to be on the front at the half mile into this year's Kentucky Derby?
I mean, the toughest thing to do is decide what you think of Derma Sotogake, because if he replicates that form from Mandarin, he could easily be up there, maybe not outright on it, but pushing it. And if he's pushing it, based on the way the Japanese contingent continues to run, I mean, he's probably right up in there. I would assume Practical Move is going to be relatively close. He's shown that sort of, I said it the other day, that he's got really what I think of as the ideal Derby running style. He can be close, but he's not dependent on the lead. He's shown finish, this, that, and the other. But he's going to come out of a race where you had 3 horses across the wire in the Anita Derby. How good is it? That it's up to interpretation. I have to think Derma Sotogake is close. I have to think Practical Move is close. I don't know. Verifying. I don't love Verifying's chances, but he kind of feels like the fly in the ointment, doesn't he? He's got it.
Yeah, he's an interesting contender to be to that early lead. So here's the things about Derma Sotogake. He does not need the lead. We did the Japanese contender video. We watched some of his other tape. He is not a one-way type horse. And then you throw in the fact that Lemaire had the experience that he did last year in the Derby, first time riding on Crown Pride, getting involved in one of the crazier Derby paces we've seen. Could there be an overreaction where he decides he doesn't want to be on the front end? I don't want that to happen as somebody who wants to see Derma Sotogake run well, but I do like the idea. Break running, get your position going forward, take the lead if nobody else wants it, which they might not. But also, if somebody wants to go hammer and tongs, if Verifying wants to go on a mission, if whomever, Cyclone Mischief, whomever wants to go on a mission, that Lemaire can, maybe guide him into a similar trip to the one you're describing as the potentially ideal Derby trip. With that in mind, I think this horse has a huge chance, whether or not he's left alone on the lead. Obviously, left alone on the lead, the best chance if that scenario develops.
Well, and also on top of that too, and I know this is suggesting that Lemaire can sort of make a lot of decisions on the fly, but if it is, let's just say Cyclone Mischief and Verifying, right? I don't mean to throw shade at anyone, but I don't look at either of them as win contenders. If Lemaire sees that they are the 2 that are intent on going, and you can park right off of them, pretend they're not even in the race. You're going to be the one to make the top of the quarter pole, and if it's a stamina test, you have as good a right as anyone else to finish. I mean, this is the first time that I think, even if you're the biggest hater of the UAE Derby form, this is the first time you have to sit here and say, you can't just immediately dismiss because of what the Japanese have done internationally, and this horse. Again, a lot of those are projected numbers, but his UAE Derby is stacking up as fast or faster than anything any of our American horses have run.
Yeah.
So you have to take him seriously. I don't know if I'm fully all in. My lean right now is he's a win or nowhere kind.
I get that.
I understand anyone that pushes back on that. Me and Mike Joyce were having a conversation earlier today about it. But I think he either wins and wins impressively, Or we talked about it before we started. Maybe they're still a little bit behind where our 3-year-olds are at this stage in the game, and he comes up wanting. But as far as the trip is concerned, he should work out a good one, shouldn't he?
Yeah, I think the other concern that's legit is the mile and a quarter. Now, I know he, got the mile and 3/16 easily in a race, and I've said this elsewhere on these airwaves, and I'll throw it out there again, that Rob Dove, one of the top 10 pro punters in the UK today, estimated as a 103 buyer. But I think he undoubtedly did it with the flow of that track, on the best part of that track, that it could be a long extra 16. So, and it could be more of a class test than we're even realizing. So I'm more, with all respect to Mike Joyce, I'm more with your way of it. It's either he is who we think he might be based on that number and he gets home, or, one of those things goes wrong and maybe all the Japanese form goes backwards. The one thing I want to say about the UAE Derby, and this came up on the Japanese video as well, but I also think that, the only other UAE Derby horse that ran a number that made me think he could win a Derby, Kentucky Derby, was Mendelssohn.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people are going to look and be like, oh, see, it can't be done. That's silly. I mean, he had no
Don't even
chance.
Get me started.
Yeah.
I have people give me shit, and I apologize. I have people give me shit still for saying that Mendelssohn was this, that, and the other. Mendelssohn was a good racehorse.
Look at what he did in the Travers.
Mendelssohn was a good horse, and he had no chance given the start and everything that happened.
Auxiliary gate.
It was a disaster. If you're basing your opinion on Mendelssohn off of the Kentucky Derby, I don't know what to tell you. I just don't think that's going to be a successful one.
Well, and let's throw one more thing in. Aidan O'Brien, as great of a trainer as he is, one thing he has not habitually done well is have horses break well in America. One thing the Japanese horses have done is ship all over the world and win under every configuration. So for me, that one is apples and oranges.
And I think the other thing you bring up, the idea that this isn't like a one-off thing that the Japanese runners did really well. We're going on, 2.5, 3 years now? That internationally, their dirt horses are running their eyeballs out. This could just simply, I was listening to you and Nick a few weeks ago. This feels like this has been a long time coming. The Japanese not only have been instilling speed, but they all have stamina. And I know you see Mind Your Biscuits and you go, well, how far did he really want to go? We see those middle distance types become the best stallions because they can both get distance and they've got speed. Yeah, I think you would be making a very, very rash decision. I've been saying this for a month and a half. Don't just throw him out just because he's coming from the UAE Derby. I think that's a stupid way to go about it.
I think it might be a foolhardy decision if you decide to go that way. We'll see. I mean, if this horse, one more thing on this horse, because, it's a pace video. He's probably the most likely horse to be in the pace. What price do you think this horse should be? This is a hard one.
What should he be? My heart of hearts, probably 10. And I think he might be 6. I mean, I said this on my show a couple weeks ago. If he trains well leading in, and he's already at Churchill.
Yes, right? He's here.
So he's here. If he's training well leading into it, is it crazy to think he's the third choice?
No, it's not crazy at all. And before Tapit Trice was so good, he might have been the second choice.
Yes. And I think those two are probably in that 6-8 to 1 range. Depending on what you do with Forte, who I think is probably, as more time goes on, I think the favorite's probably 4 to 1.
4, 9 to 2. Yeah. It's going to be a weird year. I think there is going to be a phenomenon with every long shot taking too much money, and it's hard to know where that bubble up is going to come. Next thing I want to talk to you about, because I think it's huge for this pace discussion, is the form of the Santa Anita Derby. And you already sort of hinted that maybe you're looking at this a little bit like I'm looking at this. If you look at pace figures, which we happen to have some early looks at here, both Practical Move and Mandarin Hero look the fastest to the first quarter of the American horses. Now, this is a race that came back very strong on Beyer, very meh on Sheets. 3 on the wire, that's not typically associated with good form. Mandarin Hero, a horse that we had been sort of estimating to run a mid-80s Beyer, stepping up 15 points. That doesn't exactly feel right. But if the Beyer is right, Practical Move looks like an ignored and potentially pace-advantaged horse in this race. What is your view of the Santa Anita Derby form in general? Are you taking a positive view? Are these serious pace players at least, or you take more of a negative view?
Let's start with Practical Move. I texted you earlier this week, and just sort of like out of left field. If Practical Move's trainer was listed as Pletcher or Baffert or Brown or Cox, isn't he vying for favoritism? He's run the fastest races on Beyers. He's paired up Beyer tops of 100. The distance doesn't look like it's going to be an issue. Are you going to get artificially inflated value because it says Yachtine and not one of those other names? And that's not meant as a slight to Tim Yachtine.
Not at all.
It's more that people bet trainers in races like this. I don't see anything negative really to knock about Practical Move other than that three-way photo in the Santa Anita Derby, because how likely is it that all three of those horses ran outstanding races? The only thing I will say, and we talk about Mandarin Hero, someone who we both know, who I trust, that makes figs for Japan.
Oh wow! I don't even have a Japan figure maker
So
in the back pocket.
I have ballpark figs here, right?
That's great.
The estimate for Derma Sotogake in the Saudi race was a 90. In the Dubai race for this individual was a 105.
Okay,
From
very
buyer
similar to
standpoint.
Dub.
Okay. Mandarin Hero's last race in Japan, an 83. So
Yep.
your point,
Very
kind of
similar to
mid-80,
what my folks were saying.
and this person was projecting before official numbers came out, 98, 99 buyer, comes back right around there. So I guess you have to ask yourself, do the Japanese horses move up that much racing internationally? Because, I mean, these were good horses in Japan, but now all of a sudden against some of our better dirt horses, they look like superstars.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So he did have the Santa Anita Derby as a potentially fast race
It's a fast race.
Yeah, that's
So right now, there's really only one outlier, and I say one outlier. I haven't seen the Thoroughgraph. I haven't seen Ragazin, but you say they were a little bit tepid.
on the Santa Anita race in
Okay.
particular. Michael Adolphson, I should give the source, quoted, and he referred generically to the sheets. The number he gave, I assume he's talking Thoroughgraph.
Okay. So that would be the outlier because buyer time form and other projections and whatnot have that as a very fast race. I'll be very curious to see going forward. I guess really it boils down to price, as it always does. If Practical Joke, or excuse me, Practical Move by Practical Joke ends up being 8-10 to 1, I mean, I'm going to have a piece of him everywhere. I can guarantee.
Yeah, I think that is going to work price-wise. Oh, the other, going back to Derma for 1 point, there's no bigger fan of Japanese racing. Nobody who wants to see Japanese horses do better than our guy who helps us out sometimes on the JRA side, Toshi Onakubo. And I asked him just point blank, like, what price should Derma Sotogake be? His gut was 25 to 1. Like, he still thinks this is a very big ask, and that as much success as the Japanese horses have had on turf around the world, that dirt, may be a different animal. So I thought that was an interesting data point.
Okay.
And I put him on the spot,
I feel like the Japanese are a little more reserved, though, aren't they?
It could be. Maybe he's
not playing coy, but
maybe he doesn't want to build it up. Got him up too much.
I think they're very respectful of knowing what kind of horses and trainers, and the Americans have been doing this for 149 years now. Maybe they're just trying to kind of downplay things a little bit, but I think this is the best chance.
It's at least I think it's fair to say that we're more emphasized on turf racing than they are on dirt racing in terms of their overall program and how many graded races there are. Yeah, I think it's definitely fair to say that. So that's just an interesting perspective to think about, that these aren't the best Japanese. The best Japanese horses are the turf horses, like Equinoxes. That's what they would be all about championing as their best international horse.
Might be the best horse in the world.
Yeah.
Before we move off the Santa Anita Derby, I don't know from a pace standpoint where he would be. He's not even in the field right now. I have a funny feeling Skinner is the kind of horse that you got to get him out of California. His running style is not conducive to those racetracks. It's just not. And I don't want to compare him to Opportunity because I'm sure some people.
Your boy.
I know. I'm sure some
going
people
way back to 2014 Players Podcast.
They would say that's a slight that I'm comparing this horse to.
Oh, not coming from you.
But the idea that he has a running style that in California, trying to rally from 6 or 5 or whatever off of it, it's just not. You're not conducive to success. Get him on the East Coast. If he gets into the race, he carried every inch of ground that day.
I think he's sneaky.
I don't think he's impossible. Yeah. Maybe he doesn't win, but he could certainly get a piece at a massive number.
Yeah, of the three, he's the one I'm the most interested in from a betting point of view. And that might sound weird if I'm going to be sort of taking a view against that form, but I think he'll be a big enough price if he sneaks in. Horse we have to talk more about is Verifying. Most divisive horse in the field. Nick Tamaro thinks much like you, like barely a contender. We had an interesting conversation. Sean Borman is a big fan of this horse. Okay. And we talked about that on the Pro Player show. And just looking at his pace array from the Bluegrass, I can understand his enthusiasm. Just very big internal fractions and still hanging on to finish well. My gut was I wasn't sure about the mile and a quarter.
No.
And so I was leaning a bit against, but talking to Sean and looking at his figure array for this horse, I'm, like all of them, we got to let the market decide. Sure. But I'm not as negative as you or I as often will happen, and sometimes you get, you get a rip in your pants from sitting on the fence. But that's sort of where I am with verifying at the moment. I just wanted you to expound a little on your thoughts on him and let us know what you think about him as a potential pace player here.
Put it this way, I'm guilty of lumping these horses by jurisdiction where they've been campaigned.
Logical. Okay?
And I didn't think Verifying cut the mustard in Arkansas. And for him to run as well as he did here at Keeneland against Tapit Trice, who was coming out of, let's say, South Florida Junior, because he was coming from Tampa. He wouldn't come from Gulfstream. Right. And the horses he beat at Gulfstream really haven't done anything. I'm almost looking at it saying, great, they were the two best of a mediocre bunch here in the Bluegrass. I am admitting I could be entirely wrong. You can kind of guess. As much as I feel it's one of those things, how we kind of get pet horses. I had Tapit Trice as my 1B for 2-year-olds into 3-year-olds back in December. I said, he's going to be a good horse. I didn't bet him, so now I'm rooting against him. But also, I don't.
Such a bitter man.
I know. We're horse players, aren't we? I hate to say this. I'm not using Verifying anywhere, and I at most would probably use Tapit Trice 3rd or 4th in a superfecta. I just have to be against him. I don't like this race here.
Oh, that's interesting. We'll talk more about this in depth in terms of who meets where with form. I want to bring the viewers into this. I want some comments about who you all think is the most likely pace setter in this year's Kentucky Derby. You don't necessarily have to tell us who you think is going to win, but go ahead and throw that in there if you want. But tell us who you think is going to set the pace in this year's race. I also want to mention about our In the Money Plus product. If you enjoy our content, if you follow us along on inthemoneypodcast.com, we got loads of free stuff, but we're going to have even more content behind the paywall, including a speed figure map. If you want to take a look at how these horses rate on a variety of different figure systems for the Kentucky Derby, we want you to check that out. inthemoneypodcast.com/plus. Great way to support the channel. Great way to support the podcast as well. Big question now to you, Matt, as we get ready to wind this thing down a little bit. Who else? Who's the joker in the pack? Who's the wild card horse that you think has a chance to run faster than the pace figures that they've shown so far, and maybe put a little bit of heat on this field? And if you're stumped, I can spitball.
No, I've got a horse that I think he has an immense amount of talent. My biggest fear is this is too much too soon. He's missed the break in each of his last 2 starts. Mage is not a slow horse. And I think a lot of people are looking at him saying, mid-pack. I wouldn't be stunned if, now look, it's asking a lot that he's going to all of a sudden break sharp with 170,000 people screaming at him after he's broken slowly in each of his 2 starts, most recently down in South Florida. In his debut, he broke a little bit slow, but he was fast enough to make the front and clear going 7/8. He's not a slow horse. Look, I don't own the horse. It's easy for me to sit here and say what I would do. I think it's going to be too much too soon for him. But I think he is a horse. If you want a wild card pace scenario, Mage could be part of this.
I don't hate that idea. I mean, you could argue it might be his best chance.
Oh,
you know what?
1,000%.
You know what I mean?
If he's got to make a move from mid-pack, I want no part.
It's going to be
hard. I don't want anybody from South Florida. Yeah. I have 2 jurisdictions I want horses at. Louisiana and Southern California.
A tip as to some of the content we'll be getting here going forward as far as Matt's official Derby selection. I was just thinking, I did have, and I mentioned it before, I had this wild Cyclone Mischief idea as a horse that, I could see they're like, we got into the big dance, we flashed talent, a horse that I could see them saying, hey, let's just send. I mean, especially if the conversation continues where, there's not much pace, isn't somebody over beers going to say, hey, why don't we go? I can absolutely see that happening. I'm not sure who else it's going to be at this stage, and I can't wait. As time goes on, we'll have a Timeform US pace projector to share and dissect and talk about. But, that was just another idea I had.
So another horse that if you just look at the figs and purely if you're basing it on the most recent running line, I'm not arguing with you. I think there is more there to Kingsbarns than meets the eye.
Oh, you know what? We had to talk about this horse. I'm so glad you brought him up because I was forgetting him. And he actually did, win a major Derby prep wire to wire. That would have been a major host event.
Well, and I just think it's one of those things. Yes, the pace numbers for that Louisiana Derby are
they're glacial.
They are walking. I think it would be a mistake to just assume he can't run well going faster. And especially if like we're just kind of, hemming and hawing about, well, there's only 2 or 3 horses that really want to go. Well, guess what? What if this half mile actually is like 47 and 4? That's really not that fast.
Right.
And to think that a horse like Kingsbarns can't be close to that because it's, in theory, 10 lengths faster than what he went in Louisiana, I just think it's a bit of a rash call. I get it. Every part of the handicapping being says Kingsbarns is supposed to be against him. I think he's a good horse.
There's a certain case to be made that it would have to be a case where he's better going faster, that he can click off faster fractions, and he actually went too slow early. I can't back him though because he didn't finish fast enough with an ideal setup to do so.
That's fair.
But maybe you make the argument he doesn't have to finish that much faster because he's going so much faster early. Like, he is an interesting wild card to be the actual pace setter. And I say wild card, some people are shaking their heads. How is he a wild card? He just did it last time. Boy, if you look at pace figures, it's just like you said.
I'm going way into the weeds here too. Way into the weeds. I have a funny feeling that's the best of all of Todd's horses.
Very interesting. I mean, that's controversial.
Louisiana was the best prep path for the majority. And that Louisiana Derby was shaping up like you were going to get many of the best horses. For them to throw him to the Wolves after he had won at Tampa, you could have easily run him in the Tampa Bay Derby and come here. Instead, you chose to do that with Tapatrice. I think it's because they knew Tapatrice couldn't win Louisiana Derby like that. So you throw the horse in that you think can handle it. Again, tinfoil hat right now, but I have a funny feeling that that's the best of all of Todd's.
It's going to be interesting to see. We'll have a conversation with Pletcher at some point too on these airwaves and see what we can eke out of him in terms of his opinions about his Derby runners. We're going to wrap this video. We got loads more content on the channel, In the Money Media. Please rate, review, subscribe, do all those things. Drop us a comment of who you think is going to make the lead. If you want more, much more, subscribe to the In the Money Media feed wherever you get your podcasts, and also follow us at inthemoneypodcast.com. For Matt Bernier, I'm PTF. May you win all your photos.